Welcome everyone. Imagine standing in a beautiful garden filled with flowers. You see reds, yellows, purples, and blues. The colors are stunning. But what if I told you that you're missing an entire world of colors that exist right in front of your eyes? What if I told you that a tiny bee buzzing past you can see things you will never, ever see? This isn't science fiction. This is reality. Today, we're going to explore one of nature's most fascinating mysteries. We're going to discover how bees see the world in ways that humans simply cannot. And by the end of this journey, you'll understand why flowers aren't really designed for us at all. Let me start with a simple question. Have you ever wondered why bees are so good at finding flowers? You might think it's because of smell, and yes, smell plays a role. But the real secret is in their eyes. Bees can see colors that are completely invisible to humans. To understand this, we need to talk about light itself. Think of light like a piano keyboard. When you play different keys, you get different notes. Light works the same way, but instead of notes, we get colors. The light that reaches Earth from the sun contains many different colors, like a rainbow. We call this the spectrum of light. Now here's the important part. Humans can only see a small section of this spectrum. We see what we call visible light, which includes all the colors of the rainbow from red to violet. But there's much more light out there that we simply cannot detect with our eyes. Beyond red, there's infrared light. We can't see it, but we can feel it as heat. Beyond violet, there's ultraviolet light, or UV light. This is the light that gives you a sunburn on a bright day. We know it exists because of what it does to our skin, but our eyes cannot see it. Bees, however, can see ultraviolet light perfectly. Let me explain how this works. Inside your eyes, you have special cells called photoreceptors. Think of these cells like tiny cameras that capture light. Humans have 3 types of these photoreceptor cells, and we call them cones. One type detects red light, one detects green light, and one detects blue light. Your brain takes the information from these 3 types of cones and mixes them together, like mixing paint. When all 3 types are activated equally, you see white. When only the red and green cones are activated, you see yellow. This mixing process creates all the millions of colors you can see. Bees also have 3 types of cones, but here's the amazing difference. Bees cannot see red light at all. Instead, their 3 cone types detect green, blue, and ultraviolet light. This means bees see the world in a completely different color palette than we do. Imagine if you suddenly couldn't see red anymore. Red roses would look black or dark gray to you. Red apples would look dull and unappealing. That's how bees see red objects. But now imagine you could suddenly see a brand new color that you've never seen before, a color that doesn't even have a name. That's what ultraviolet vision is like for bees. So what does a flower look like to a bee? This is where things get really interesting. Many flowers have evolved specifically to attract bees, and they've done this by developing ultraviolet patterns that only bees can see. These patterns are like secret landing strips, guiding bees directly to the nectar and pollen. Let me give you a concrete example. Look at a simple yellow flower, like a black-eyed Susan. To your eyes, it appears mostly yellow with a dark center. Pleasant, but fairly simple. To a bee, however, this same flower looks completely different. The petals have ultraviolet patterns that create a bullseye effect, with bright UV colors pointing directly toward the center where the nectar is located. It's like the difference between a plain white piece of paper and that same paper with a bright neon arrow drawn on it. Except you can't see the arrow, but the bee can. Scientists discovered this in a fascinating way. In the 1960s, researchers started taking photographs of flowers using special cameras that could detect ultraviolet light. When they developed these photos, they were absolutely stunned. Flowers that looked plain to human eyes revealed elaborate, intricate patterns in UV light. One of the most dramatic examples is the common evening primrose. In visible light, it appears as a simple pale yellow flower. But in ultraviolet light, it shows bold patterns radiating from the center, like a spectacular sunburst. These patterns are invisible to us, but they're like bright neon signs to bees. Now you might be wondering, why did this evolve? Why do flowers have these secret patterns? The answer is all about survival and reproduction. Flowers need bees to spread their pollen so they can reproduce. Bees need flowers for nectar and pollen to eat. This is what scientists call a mutualistic relationship, where both species benefit. Over millions of years, flowers that were better at attracting bees produced more seeds and spread more successfully. The flowers that developed ultraviolet patterns had a huge advantage because they could communicate directly with bees in a way that other insects or animals couldn't see. This gave them a private channel of communication. Think of it like having a secret code. Imagine you're running a store, and you want to attract only your best customers. So you create signs that only they can read, using special glasses you've given them. Everyone else walks past without noticing, but your best customers see the signs clearly and come right in. That's exactly what flowers do with ultraviolet patterns. But here's something even more amazing. Different types of bees can see slightly different ranges of ultraviolet light. Some can see deeper into the UV spectrum than others. This means that some flowers have evolved to attract specific types of bees by using UV patterns that only certain bee species can see best. It's like nature has created multiple secret channels, each tuned to a different frequency. Let's talk about how scientists actually study this. Obviously, we can't ask a bee what it sees. So how do we know all this information? Researchers use several clever methods. First, they use spectrophotometry. This is a device that measures exactly which wavelengths of light a flower reflects. By analyzing this data, scientists can determine which colors are visible in the UV range. Then they use special UV photography to create images that show us what these patterns might look like. But there's another method that's even more direct. Scientists study the bee's eye itself. By examining the photoreceptor cells in bee eyes under microscopes and testing how these cells respond to different wavelengths of light, researchers can map out exactly what bees can and cannot see. They've even done behavioral experiments. In these tests, scientists train bees to associate certain UV patterns with food rewards. The bees quickly learn to recognize and prefer flowers with specific UV markings, proving that they not only see these patterns but actively use them to make decisions. Now let me share something that might surprise you even more. Bees don't just use UV vision to find flowers. They also use it to navigate and communicate. The sky itself looks different to a bee. Sunlight scatters in the atmosphere, and this scattering creates patterns of polarized light. Humans can't see these patterns, but bees can detect them, especially in the ultraviolet range. This gives bees a kind of natural compass that helps them navigate even on cloudy days. Think of it like having a GPS built into your eyes. Even when the sun is hidden behind clouds, bees can determine which direction is which by reading the polarized UV light in the sky. This is how bees can fly several miles away from their hive to find flowers and then find their way back home with perfect accuracy. Bees also have another incredible ability related to their vision. They can see much faster than we can. What does this mean? Well, when you watch a movie, you're actually seeing a series of still images flashing by very quickly, usually 24 frames per second. Your brain blends these images together to create the illusion of smooth motion. Bees process visual information much faster than humans. If a bee were watching a movie in a theater, it wouldn't see smooth motion. It would see a flickering slideshow of individual images. This is because bees can detect changes in light up to about 300 times per second, while humans can only detect about 60 changes per second. Why do bees need such fast vision? Because they fly quickly through complex environments. When you're zipping through a garden at high speed, dodging leaves and branches, you need to process visual information extremely quickly to avoid crashes. This fast vision, combined with their UV sight, makes bees incredibly efficient flyers and foragers. Let's go deeper into the structure of a bee's eye. Bees actually have 5 eyes total. They have 2 large compound eyes on the sides of their head, and 3 smaller simple eyes called ocelli on top of their head. The compound eyes are the ones that see in color and UV light. Each compound eye is made up of thousands of tiny individual units called ommatidia. A single honeybee has about 5,500 ommatidia in each eye. Each ommatidium acts like a tiny eye, capturing a small piece of the overall image. Think of it like a digital photograph made up of thousands of pixels. Each pixel shows one color, and when you put all the pixels together, you get a complete picture. That's similar to how a bee's compound eye works, except each ommatidium is like a pixel that can move and adjust independently. This compound eye structure gives bees some advantages and some disadvantages compared to human eyes. Bees are excellent at detecting motion. Because they have thousands of ommatidia, each pointing in a slightly different direction, they can instantly notice when something moves anywhere in their field of vision. This helps them avoid predators and navigate while flying. However, bees don't see fine detail as well as humans do. While we can read tiny text or see intricate patterns from far away, bees see the world in somewhat lower resolution. But they don't need to read books or recognize faces. They need to spot flowers, detect motion, and navigate. Their eyes are perfectly designed for exactly those tasks. The 3 simple eyes on top of a bee's head, the ocelli, have a different job. These eyes don't form detailed images. Instead, they mainly detect light intensity and help the bee maintain stability while flying. Think of them like the horizon indicator in an airplane cockpit. They help the bee know which way is up and maintain balance in the air. Now let's talk about some specific flowers and how they use UV patterns. The differences are absolutely remarkable. Take the marsh marigold, a bright yellow flower that grows in wet areas. To human eyes, it's a simple, cheerful yellow bloom. But under UV light, the petals appear dark, almost black, while the center glows brightly. This creates a dramatic contrast that makes the center impossible for a bee to miss. Or consider the silverweed flower. In visible light, it appears uniformly pale yellow. But in UV light, each petal has a dark base that creates a star pattern pointing toward the center. It's like the flower is saying, the nectar is right here in the middle. Follow the arrows. Some flowers have even more complex patterns. The common poppy shows different UV patterns depending on the variety. Some poppies have UV-reflective centers surrounded by UV-absorbing petals. Others have UV patterns that create concentric circles, like a target. Here's something fascinating. Some flowers can actually change their UV patterns. Certain species alter their UV reflection after they've been pollinated or after their nectar has been depleted. This tells visiting bees, don't waste your time here. I've already been visited. Go to a different flower. It's like a shop putting up a "sold out" sign. This benefits both the flower and the bee. The flower doesn't waste the bee's time, so the bee stays in a good mood and continues visiting other flowers of the same species. The bee doesn't waste energy visiting flowers with no reward. Now I want to tell you about one of the most surprising discoveries in this field. Scientists found that some flowers have UV patterns that we still don't fully understand. For example, sunflowers have incredibly complex UV patterns that seem to do more than just guide bees to nectar. The patterns might help bees recognize individual flowers or remember which ones they've already visited. Some researchers think these patterns might even communicate information about the quality or quantity of nectar available. It's like flowers have developed an entire visual language that we're only beginning to decode. Let me share another mind-blowing fact. Not all bees see UV light in exactly the same way. Different species of bees have slightly different visual systems adapted to their specific lifestyles. Bumblebees, for instance, are active in lower light conditions than honeybees. They often fly early in the morning or late in the evening when it's dimmer. Their eyes are adapted to gather more light, which makes them better at seeing in these conditions but slightly less sharp in bright daylight. Some solitary bee species that specialize in visiting specific types of flowers have visual systems tuned to detect the particular UV patterns of their preferred flowers. It's like having a radio tuned to exactly the right frequency to receive a specific station. Now let's address an interesting question. If UV patterns are so important, why do flowers bother with visible colors at all? Why are there red roses and blue cornflowers if bees can't fully appreciate these colors? The answer is that flowers don't just attract bees. Many flowers are pollinated by multiple types of animals, including butterflies, birds, bats, and other insects. Each pollinator has different vision. Birds, for example, can see red very well, and many bird-pollinated flowers are bright red. Butterflies can see both visible colors and UV light, similar to bees but with some differences. So flowers use a combination of visible colors and UV patterns to communicate with different pollinators. It's like a billboard that has one message in English and another message in Spanish. Different audiences read different messages, but everyone gets attracted to the sign. Here's something else that's quite amazing. Some flowers use UV patterns to create optical illusions. Certain orchids have UV patterns that make parts of the flower appear three-dimensional to bees. The patterns create the illusion of depth, making the landing platform look more obvious and inviting. Other flowers use UV patterns to mimic the appearance of other insects. Some orchids have UV patterns that look like female bees to male bees. The male bees try to mate with the flower and end up covered in pollen, which they then carry to the next flower. It's a trick, but it works brilliantly. Nature is full of these clever strategies. Let's talk about what happens when this system goes wrong. In recent decades, scientists have noticed that some modern hybrid flowers bred by humans have lost their UV patterns. When plant breeders create new flower varieties, they usually select for traits that humans can see, like bigger blooms or brighter visible colors. But in doing this, they sometimes accidentally breed out the UV patterns. The result is flowers that look beautiful to us but are much less attractive to bees. These flowers often get fewer bee visits and produce less fruit and seeds. It's a reminder that we need to think about pollinators, not just human preferences, when we breed plants. This has practical implications for agriculture. Many of our food crops depend on bee pollination. If we create crop varieties that bees find less attractive because we've removed UV patterns, we could reduce crop yields. Some agricultural scientists are now specifically checking UV patterns when they develop new crop varieties to make sure the flowers remain attractive to bees. Now I want to tell you about some cutting-edge research happening right now. Scientists are using artificial intelligence and computer vision to analyze UV patterns in flowers. They're building databases of thousands of flower species, documenting their UV patterns, and looking for common principles. One fascinating discovery is that flowers in different environments have different types of UV patterns. Flowers in dense forests, where light is dim and filtered through leaves, tend to have very bold, high-contrast UV patterns. Flowers in open meadows, where light is bright and direct, often have more subtle UV patterns. This makes sense when you think about it. In a dark forest, you need a very obvious sign to stand out. In a bright meadow, a subtle sign is enough. Flowers have adapted their UV signals to match their environment, just like you might shout in a noisy room but whisper in a quiet library. Researchers are also studying how climate change might affect UV patterns. As temperatures rise and weather patterns change, some flowers are blooming at different times or in different conditions. This might affect how their UV patterns appear to bees and could potentially disrupt pollination. Some scientists are even exploring whether we could use UV patterns to help bee conservation. By understanding which UV patterns bees find most attractive, we could design gardens and wildflower meadows that are especially appealing to bees. This could help support bee populations, which have been declining in many parts of the world. Let me tell you about an experiment that really demonstrates the power of UV vision. Scientists created artificial flowers, some with UV patterns and some without. They placed these flowers in a garden and watched which ones bees visited. The results were dramatic. Bees visited the flowers with UV patterns far more frequently, even when the flowers without UV patterns had more nectar. This shows that UV patterns aren't just helpful, they're essential for communication between flowers and bees. It's the primary language they use. Here's another interesting aspect. Bee vision also affects how bees see other bees. The bodies of many bee species reflect UV light in specific patterns. These patterns might help bees recognize members of their own species or even identify individual bees. Some researchers think bees might use UV patterns like we use faces, to tell each other apart. The hairs on a bee's body, which look fuzzy and golden to us, often have specific UV reflection properties. When a bee is covered in pollen, this changes how it reflects UV light. Other bees might be able to see this and know that this bee has found a good source of flowers. It's like having a sign on your back that says, "I just came from an amazing restaurant." Other bees can read that sign and might follow you to find the same flowers. Now let's think about this from an evolutionary perspective. How did bees develop UV vision in the first place? Scientists believe that the ancestors of modern bees could see UV light millions of years ago, long before flowers even existed. They probably used UV vision to navigate and to see patterns on leaves and other surfaces. When flowering plants evolved about 130 million years ago, they encountered insects that already had UV vision. The flowers that happened to reflect UV light in interesting patterns got more insect visits. Over time, natural selection favored flowers with more and more elaborate UV patterns because these flowers were more successful at reproduction. It's a beautiful example of coevolution. Bees didn't develop UV vision for flowers. But once flowers appeared, they evolved to take advantage of the UV vision that bees already had. And then bees may have refined their UV vision to better see flowers. Each species influenced the evolution of the other. This kind of relationship has shaped much of the natural world we see today. Let me share something that really puts this in perspective. There are about 20,000 species of bees in the world, and most of them have UV vision. There are about 350,000 species of flowering plants, and a huge percentage of them have UV patterns. This represents millions of years of evolution, creating an intricate communication system that operates in a spectrum of light invisible to humans. We walk through this world every day, completely unaware of these secret signals happening all around us. Every garden, every meadow, every forest is filled with UV patterns that we cannot see. It's humbling to realize how much we're missing. Some researchers have tried to imagine what it would be like if humans could suddenly see UV light. They've created special visualizations that translate UV patterns into colors we can see. When you look at these images, the world appears almost alien. Flowers that seemed ordinary explode with intricate designs. The sky shows patterns we never knew existed. It reminds us that our perception of reality is limited by our senses. What we think of as the world is really just the small slice of reality that our human senses can detect. Bees live in the same physical world we do, but they experience it in a fundamentally different way. This raises some interesting philosophical questions. What is the true color of a flower? Is it the color we see, or the color a bee sees? Or is it both? Or neither? Perhaps color doesn't exist in the objective world at all. Perhaps color is something that only exists in the mind of the observer, created by the interaction between light and the visual system of each species. These are deep questions that scientists and philosophers continue to debate. Now let's talk about practical applications of this knowledge. Understanding bee vision has helped us in several ways. Farmers and gardeners can now choose plants that are particularly attractive to bees, helping to support pollinator populations. This is especially important because many bee species are threatened by habitat loss, pesticides, and disease. By planting flowers with strong UV patterns, we can create bee-friendly gardens that provide excellent food sources for these crucial pollinators. Some conservation organizations now publish lists of the best plants for bees, taking UV patterns into account. Architects and urban planners are also starting to think about bee vision. When designing green spaces in cities, they can choose plants that will attract and support urban bee populations. This helps maintain biodiversity even in heavily developed areas. There are also some surprising technological applications. Engineers have developed cameras that can see in UV light, inspired by bee vision. These cameras are used for various purposes, from detecting counterfeit money to examining works of art to find hidden details or repairs that are invisible in normal light. Some researchers are even exploring whether UV vision could inspire new approaches to computer vision and robotics. A robot with UV vision might be able to navigate or identify objects in ways that current robots cannot. Let me tell you about one more fascinating discovery. Scientists found that the UV patterns on flowers can be affected by environmental stress. When a plant is struggling due to drought, disease, or poor soil, its UV patterns may become less distinct. Bees can detect this and may avoid these stressed flowers. This is actually beneficial for both the plant and the bee. The stressed plant probably has less nectar and lower quality pollen, so the bee saves energy by avoiding it. And the plant doesn't waste resources trying to attract pollinators when it's not in good condition to produce seeds. It's another example of how sophisticated this communication system really is. Now think about this. Every time you see a bee landing on a flower, you're witnessing a moment of communication in a language you cannot perceive. The flower is displaying its UV patterns, essentially saying, "Come here, I have nectar." The bee is reading these patterns and making decisions based on information that's completely invisible to you. It's happening everywhere, all the time, in every garden and wild place on Earth. It's one of the fundamental processes that keeps ecosystems functioning, and most people never even think about it. This brings me to an important point about biodiversity. The relationship between bees and flowers shows us why we need to protect not just individual species, but entire ecosystems. Bees and flowers are interdependent. If bee populations decline, many flowers won't get pollinated. If flowers disappear, bees lose their food source. And it's not just bees and flowers. Many other animals depend on the fruits and seeds that result from pollination. Birds eat the berries. Mammals eat the fruits. Insects live in the plants. Everything is connected. When we protect bees and their ability to see UV patterns, we're really protecting a whole web of life. Let me share one final mind-blowing fact. Some scientists estimate that if we could see all the wavelengths of light that exist, from radio waves to gamma rays, the world would look so different that we wouldn't recognize it. We'd see radio signals from cell phones and Wi-Fi routers glowing in the air. We'd see the infrared heat radiating from every living thing. We'd see UV patterns on every flower and possibly on many other surfaces too. Bees can see just one additional slice of this spectrum beyond what we see, and it already reveals a hidden world of patterns and signals. Imagine what else is out there that we're missing. This should make us humble about our place in nature. We often think of ourselves as the most advanced observers of the natural world. We have science and technology. We have microscopes and telescopes. But a tiny bee, with a brain smaller than a grain of rice, can see things we cannot see without special equipment. Every species has its own unique way of perceiving the world, adapted to its specific needs. We're not seeing the real world. We're seeing the human version of the world, filtered through our particular set of senses. So why does all this matter for your everyday life? Why should you care that bees can see ultraviolet light? First, it should change how you look at nature. The next time you see a flower, remember that you're only seeing part of its beauty. There's an entire dimension of color and pattern that exists beyond your perception. This should fill you with wonder and curiosity about the natural world. Second, it should make you appreciate bees and other pollinators. These creatures aren't just randomly buzzing around. They're performing a crucial service, guided by signals we cannot see. About 1/3 of the food we eat depends on pollination by bees and other insects. Without them, our diet would be drastically different. Third, it's a reminder that there's always more to learn. Science continues to reveal hidden aspects of reality that we never suspected. Staying curious and open-minded is essential. What else don't we know? What other secrets is nature keeping from us? Fourth, it has practical implications. If you have a garden, you can choose plants that support bees. You can avoid using pesticides that harm pollinators. You can create habitat that helps these crucial insects survive. Every small action matters. And finally, it's a lesson in perspective. We tend to think that our way of seeing the world is the only way, or at least the best way. But that's not true. Every species, every creature, has its own valid perspective. A bee's view of a flower is just as real as yours, even though it's completely different. This applies to human interactions too. Different people perceive situations differently based on their experiences, their culture, their individual psychology. Just because someone sees things differently than you do doesn't mean they're wrong. They might be seeing something you're missing, just like bees see UV patterns that we cannot detect. The world of bee vision teaches us to be humble, curious, and respectful of other perspectives, both in nature and in our human relationships. Think about it. Right now, as you go about your day, there are entire dimensions of reality surrounding you that you cannot perceive. Ultraviolet patterns on flowers. Radio waves carrying information through the air. Magnetic fields that some animals can sense. Sounds too high or too low for human ears. Chemical signals that other creatures use to communicate. You're living in a small bubble of perception, experiencing only the tiny fraction of reality that your human senses can detect. And that's okay. That's how every creature lives. But knowing this should make you more curious, more humble, and more appreciative of the incredible complexity and diversity of life on Earth. Bees have been seeing ultraviolet colors for millions of years, long before humans existed. They'll probably continue seeing these colors long after we're gone. The secret language between flowers and bees will continue, invisible to human eyes, as it has for countless generations. But now you know about it. You understand that when you look at a simple yellow flower, you're missing the spectacular UV patterns that make it irresistible to bees. You know that nature has communication channels operating in spectrums of light you cannot see. You know that reality is far richer and more complex than what your eyes tell you. And perhaps that knowledge will change how you see the world, even if you can't see ultraviolet light. Perhaps you'll look at a garden with new appreciation, knowing that there's a hidden world of color and pattern all around you. Perhaps you'll feel more connected to nature, understanding that you're part of an intricate web of life where every species has its own special abilities and perspectives. The bees are out there right now, seeing colors you cannot imagine, following patterns you cannot detect, performing their ancient dance with flowers in a spectrum of light that remains forever invisible to human eyes. But you don't need to see ultraviolet light to appreciate the miracle of it all. You just need to know it exists, to understand how it works, and to feel a sense of wonder at the hidden complexity of the natural world. That wonder, that curiosity, that appreciation for the unseen, that's something uniquely human. That's our special ability. So the next time you see a bee on a flower, stop for a moment. Watch it work. And remember that you're witnessing something extraordinary, a moment of communication in a language of light and color that has been refined over millions of years of evolution, a secret conversation that you can understand but never quite see.